Christine Brennan just exposed the WNBA in a major way.
Christine Brennan is one of the best sports writers in the country, has been for a long time.
Caitlin Clark is way more important to the WNBA than Tiger Woods was to men's golf, even though he was huge. And to then see this negativity, like why and what should have been done? I looked seriously at the leadership of the WNBA. And how could you not be prepared for this moment? You've seen it happening in the Big Ten. You've seen it at Iowa. You see these TV.
The WNBA was just made public in the most horrible manner imaginable. Christine Brennan, a legendary journalist for USA Today, she declared she had had enough of the bullshit and exploded a bomb of truth so big it nearly destroyed the league headquarters. Regarding the WNBA's mistreatment of Caitlin Clark, we're talking about receipts, pettiness.
It came out, what she had to say in this book was going to shake the ground of the WNBA. She's been around for a very long time, and she knows the inner and outer workings of this league. Christine Brennan let it be known in multiple interviews that the WNBA was not ready for a superstar like Caitlin.
And a total breakdown of their credibility. It's a vicious appearance that ought to make everyone tremble, from the commissioner's office to envious veterans. And really, what are your thoughts? Is the WNBA's huge faceplant motivated by jealousy for Caitlin Clark?
The thing I don't get, Christine, is that in the case of Tiger and in the case of Jordan, the other players and the league around them, in Tiger's case, the PGA Tour, realized that a rising tide raises all boats and were incredibly supportive of Tiger and Jordan. With Caitlin, it seems like, for whatever reason, she's polarizing. Like she's been hit with more flagrant fouls than any player ever this year. They tried to come at you when you were writing a story and said, don't ask questions about why people don't like Caitlin Clark. But I'm going to ask you, Christine, why is she polarizing in your opinion? Why do people not embrace the phenomenon that is Caitlin Clark?
Or is it just blatant ineptitude on the part of the clown? If you believe that the WNBA players are jealous, please let me know in the comments section below. Come on.
One of the big points in the book, I deal with all of this and my research and reporting, because I was perplexed as well. I mean, this is the greatest moment ever for the WNBA. Yep. We wish it happened sooner. Of course we wish it happened sooner. There were amazing players who, as you know, both you guys know, were toiling in obscurity, the male-dominated mainstream sports media ignoring.
This is the beginning of this complete soap opera. After spending years on the planet, Christine Brennan, who has essentially covered more women's hoops than half the league's players, made the decision to publish a book. Additionally, it's not some adorable yes girl power nonsense. Not at all. She launched an intense investigation into the league's terrible handling of the once-in-a-lifetime Caitlin Clark moment. This was more than just a fiery opinion.
From home like everybody else. And I think, guys, that actually helped me understand as a journalist the fascination, because I've covered a lot over my career and been very fortunate to be at Wimbledon's and Super Bowls and Tiger Woods and you name it, I've covered it. And I'm so lucky to have done that. And I found myself fascinated, like, who is this? And I'm getting text messages from guys who would never have watched a second of women's basketball. Good guys, they want their daughters to play sports. I mean, good people, but just And they're texting, are you there? I'm watching. Are you seeing this performance? And that told me something that I actually was very helpful to be at home watching it versus being on press row, talking to a bunch of other journalists, that like, okay, there's something going on in the country here. And it's everyone's fascinated and people are standing in line for hours in the cold around the Big Ten, this barnstorming tour. And it's all about a basketball player who happens to be a woman.
Scorched earth journalism was what this was. Additionally, the WNBA is still feeling the effects of the shock. Brennan did not show up to present awards for participation. She revealed how ignorant, envious, and downright indolent the WNBA's ruling elite were when the biggest female basketball star in history landed in their laps. Caitlin Clark is more than just a potential customer. She is the one person who elevated the WNBA from background noise to the forefront. And it seems that the league was taking antacids rather than champagne because they detested every second of their own unexpected prominence. This is only one of the astounding revelations from Brennan's expose. Caitlin called a top league official to get their opinion the day after. She formally filed for the 2024 draft. You would expect fireworks, wouldn't you? Confetti cannons and hype.
Unauthorized, which is not ominous at all. You want it to be unauthorized because I can tell the truth, unvarnished. Caitlin's quoted throughout the book. She was great answering any question I asked her. But but dealing with these important issues. So you've got a 74% black league. We understand this. I mean, I'm white. You know, Ramona, I think you guys are white.
Yeah.
We have no idea what it's like to be black in America. And I say that. Let's be brutally honest here. Here comes a white woman from Iowa, and she's going to be the biggest superstar. Now, absolutely, the spotlight's shining on her. Finally, it's shining on all these other players who deserved it for years but never got it. And that's a wonderful turn of events. But instead of focusing on the positives, sadly, the WNBA players, so many of them...
Give it another go. She was told quite seriously by this league suit that Clark's arrival was the most significant development since Maya Mormor. Maya, with all due respect to a legend, Maya was mostly unknown to the general public outside of ardent hoops fans. She couldn't have been chosen from a grocery queue. Brennan's decades of experience really come into play here. She realized at a way what these fools didn't have. Caitlin Clark was more than just another outstanding athlete.
And an antagonist. And I've argued that the NBA could use a little bit more of hero and villain to popularize the sport again. The WNBA does not need that, because for a lot of America, Caitlin Clark is the hero. And anyone that comes to Caitlin Clark's defense is a hero. And everyone that flagrantly fouls her, speaks poorly of her, acts like she's not great, is the villain, and then vice versa on that. How big of a part of the story is that when you look at the conflict surrounding Caitlin?
She was poised to become a cultural tsunami that would overthrow all outdated claims that the WNBA is a niche sport. Brendan could already see that the entire country was going to be glued to the Caitlin Clark show, while these naive executives were busy comparing her to celebrities who barely affected viewership. What was the league's reaction to this invaluable warning? They did nothing at all but sit on their hands. The level of incompetence required to overlook the simplest marketing blunder in sports history is nearly astounding. However, it only becomes more astounding.
Grown men on talking head shows wanting to fight each other over women's basketball and talking about it, right? We've got all these hot takes about all this going on, Christine. How big of a part of the story is that for you, and is that for this book?
I deal with it for sure in the book. And, you know, I think what we've seen is surprising to me. Having covered women's sports as well as men's, you know, for the length of my career.
Brennan lays everything out in his book. The WNBA suits were unable to even anticipate the Caitlin Clark effect, let alone prepare for it. They genuinely couldn't imagine a future in which people cared about their product because they were so accustomed to being the constant backbench of professional sports. Imagine owning a bakery and being astonished when customers truly come in to purchase bread.
And here comes Caitlin Clark, and let's say it, and I say it in the book, I'd go into this in depth. A white woman from Iowa in a 74% black league. That's an issue. The book is the first real journalistic look at this entire season and at Caitlin Clark and what she's done and all these issues that are out there. No holds barred. I shy away from nothing.
That is the degree of pitiful behavior that Brennan discovered, and it's not as if no one anticipated this. It's evident from Brennan's reporting that many reporters and even YouTubers had been keeping up with Clark since her Iowa days, clearly indicating that she was unique. The WNBA front staff reportedly didn't even bother to check their spreadsheets, despite the fact that her fan base was enormous, active, and prepared to buy out venues the moment she went pro. The statistics, meanwhile, provide the full picture. The Fever's average attendance in 2023 was 4,000 per game, which is comparable to the capacity of a Texas high school arena on a typical Tuesday.
And I look at the way players like Diana Taurasi, Brianna Stewart, Cheryl Swoops with her flurry of falsehoods, Cheryl Reeve, the Olympic coach, Gina Auriemma, really tried to minimize her and were very critical of her. That stunned me. You should be saying, this is great. You don't have to cheer for her. You guard her. You play tough. She's not a victim. She loves to throw it at people. She's feisty and tough out there. And that makes her, I think, even more appealing to so many people. But for this group of people to want to say such negative things and be so wrong about her, okay, fine. It's a free country. You can do what you want. But what she's doing by going into the WNBA.
Then, as if it were a Taylor Swift concert, spectators are lining up outside 2 hours before Caitlin Clark comes for a preseason warm-up. The security of the facility was genuinely taken aback. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. How, therefore, did the WNBA take advantage of this new fan base? Did they treat their generational cash cow like royalty? Consider planning eye-catching advertising efforts? Obviously not. They reacted as if they were sour old neighbors, almost irritated that these new eyes were at last taking notice. They seemed to prefer their small pond over the ocean, all of a sudden, incredibly unbelievable. The most damning aspect is unquestionably the jealousy Brennan discovers.
So Caitlin Clark is way more important to the WNBA than Tiger Woods was to men's golf, even though he was huge to men's golf. And to then see this negativity, the next question would be, or your viewers and listeners are probably say, okay, so like why? And what should have been done? And I look seriously at the leadership of the WNBA. And how could you not be prepared for this moment? You've seen it happening in the Big Ten. You've seen it at Iowa. You see these TV ratings. 4 million more, as I said, watching the women than the men. I think it's worth repeating a few times because it is such a stunning statistic.
Her book demonstrates the underlying animosity that was firmly ingrained. The fact that Caitlin Clark, hardly a rookie, was attracting larger audiences and airtime than seasoned athletes who had been working hard for 10 years was too much for players. League executives and even legacy media figures to take the gyms were suddenly crowded. The ratings were really high. Every podcast desired a segment. Clark is to be thanked. The league and some of its players responded with freezing cold shoulders, nasty fouls, and sarcastic little remarks, rather than acknowledging that everyone's boats were being lifted by the rising tide. Refs began to swallow whistles. Media writers started writing critical articles about Clark's excessive popularity. They protested because it wasn't in their preferred color, as if someone had given them a winning lottery ticket. The most absurd aspect is how evident all of this was to anyone who was actually listening. Caitlin learned a lot about creating a national brand during her 4 years at Iowa by sheer force of personality and skill. She broke records, sold out arenas, and essentially converted every executive into a WNBA fan. It was obvious to everyone with even a passing familiarity that her fan base would accompany her to the league. Everyone, with the apparent exception of those whose primary responsibility it is to promote women's basketball. They failed to see that the gates had been blown off their hinges because they were too preoccupied pretending to be gatekeepers. Brennan also delves further into the WNBA's cultural illness, which contributed to this catastrophe. There seems to be a perverse belief, in some quarters of the league, that their game is somehow tainted by mass appeal. As those sold-out shows, millions of new admirers, and massive TV deals are all examples of sellout immorality. Brennan's book reveals how this style of thinking permeated Clark's treatment over the entire season.
One white, one black. And so we have that moment with these two. But the one thing I know about sports, you need rivalry. That's what makes people watch. They want to watch games of consequence between rivals. They don't want everybody being nice to one another. So the social media is different today than it was in 1979 when it didn't exist. But, I always tell the players, I was told a long time ago, if someone's typing something in and you wouldn't ask their advice, ignore it. So it's a balance, but certainly from a marketing dollars, but corporate partners are stepping up to endorse these players much more so than they were.
She was permitted to become the object of jealously motivated hacking instead of being shielded and hailed as the future's face. Coaches made scathing remarks, players made poor shots, and the media attempted to make it seem like Clark was receiving too much attention. Imagine being so outdated that you feel offended by your league at last. The league's face-planting of their largest ever marketing opportunity is painfully evident, with Caitlin Clark creating more talk than the WNBA had experienced in decades. They were sitting on a goldmine. They stumbled over the word promotion as if they had never heard it before. The timing, a series of perplexing decisions that appeared to be drawn at random. The merchandise situation, a complete clown show, and the general marketing strategy. It seemed to be administered by individuals who would be more at ease managing a lemonade stand than a professional sports league. Brennan's work makes it quite evident that this was more than just incompetence. Deliberate blind eye syndrome was the cause, despite mounds of evidence that Caitlin Clark was their ticket to the moon. They preferred the security of their familiar tiny world to the terrifying prospect of real success. We are currently in the midst of Clark's sophomore season, and the league is still unsure of how to use the incredible star power they have acquired. Every time she performs, the TV ratings continue to go crazy. Her sneakers and jerseys are selling out more quickly than the limited edition Jordans. Fans yell like it's a rock concert when she enters each sold-out arena. However, it still seems strange that many people in the league would want the entire Caitlin Clark circus to simply vanish so they could return to their comfortable little echo chamber. Brennan's story demonstrates the extent of this dysfunction, which is utterly devastating to the league. You had a league that was just surviving, on financial life support, hoping for anything to keep it afloat. Next to walk on stage is Caitlin Clark, a generational sensation with mass market charm, who attracts sponsors, TV agreements, and crowds like a switch. What action did the league take?
Incredible moment on a global scale for our game, for our players. It's like the fans are absolutely incredible. It's the same when we go on the road. Like there's so many people that are showing up in fever gear. It's really affecting, teams all across our league, which is a really great thing. And, really, I think we're just scratching the surface.
Like a squeaky door they couldn't bother to oil, they regarded it as an annoyance. I would love to see a larger example of a company actively acting against its own interests if there has ever been one. This has far-reaching repercussions that go beyond women's hoops. This is an excellent example of how large organizations may become so mired in antiquated practices that they would prefer to oppose change than welcome it. Caitlin Clark was a genuine lightning bolt to the WNBA. They only needed to showcase her genius, shield her from jealous drama, and watch the respect and money come in. However, they opted for antiquated ideas and small-minded animosity instead. They appear to have been insulted. Success arrived sporting an Iowa jersey and a ponytail. The fact that these league insiders misread the situation is among the harshest. Realities Brennan presents.
We're bringing more and more fans to this league, people that have maybe never watched the WNBA before, and it kind of takes your breath away at points.
They were so arrogant, believing that a popular success would ruin their priceless brand. They mistakenly believed that being noble meant remaining niche, completely disregarding the fact that professional sports are meant to amuse as many people as possible. And it would have been absurdly easy to correct this. Simply support Caitlin Clark, protect her from the trivial cheap shots, and capitalize on the limelight that comes with the title. However, they took the exact opposite action, essentially creating speed obstacles for their own celebrity. Brennan also reveals how independent reporters, YouTubers, TikTokers, and new media saw this coming while the establishment was still asleep. These internet commentators recognized that Caitlin's appeal extended beyond die-hard basketball fans. She was on the verge of becoming a cornerstone of pop culture. The WNBA, however, was mired in 1998, fumbling with every opportunity to innovate and playing catch-up. They repeatedly demonstrated their lack of awareness through misguided public relations, errors, and odd scheduling that concealed marquee games during times when there was no audience. This wasn't only a mistake, Brennan makes it glaringly clear. It was nearly self-destructive. With Clark, the WNBA had the simplest slam dunk of their lives. However, they did not consider her as the miraculous development engine that she obviously was, but rather as a problem to be contained. Even worse, the coaching staff and locker rooms were directly affected by this foul attitude, rather of seeing that Clark was beneficial to everyone's finances. Too many coaches and players pretended that her fame had stolen theirs. A rising tide raises all boats. Not Caitlin's attention means you sink. That's the newsflash. Additionally, keep in mind that the stakes are worldwide. Women's basketball is booming abroad, and the WNBA had a fantastic opportunity to establish itself as the premier travel destination. Sweetheart Caitlin is more than simply an American. Fans are flocking to her from all around the world. However, rather than capitalizing on that global momentum, the league's minor dysfunction became a part of the global narrative. Brennan's book goes so far as to explain that Clark's on-court cheap shots weren't only competitive fouls. They belonged to an entire horrible culture that was out to get her. The league's internal jealousy was manifested on national television through those hits, hard fouls, and incessant trash talk. And throughout all of this, where was Kathy Engelbert? The commissioner's sole responsibility is to safeguard the league's most valuable assets. Where was he? Brennan claims that they are either ignorant or complicit. It doesn't seem good either way. There was a clear indication of a leadership void at the highest level each time a player got away with a dirty shot on Clark and each time the referees blew the whistle. When pointing out how many simple turning points the WNBA had, Brennan doesn't mince words. They had the opportunity to intervene in the second. It was clear that Clark was the object of a methodical attack. They could have launched incredible advertising campaigns that promoted Clark's competitors and highlighted her, increasing everyone's marketability. They had the opportunity to establish a dynastic era, attract larger sponsorships, and negotiate new TV deals. Rather, they allowed it to decay. Her book delves into the dynamics behind the scenes as well. As it turns out, the WNBA was concerned that Clark's ascent might eclipse their own history. They aggressively undermined her, making things more difficult so she would find it difficult to shine, rather than embracing her. Then, conveniently forgetting that they spent the entire previous year disparaging the person who made it possible. These same people appear online boasting about how women's basketball finally matters. The level of hypocrisy is astounding. Brennan also emphasizes how Clark wasn't the only victim of this small-minded jealousy. Everyone still had money on the table. Sellout crowds, increased viewership, and increasing jersey sales. This resulted in increased investment overall, greater facilities, and higher compensation. However, a lot of people in the league also behaved as though Caitlin's success threatened them personally rather than as a source of income. She demonstrates how the most obstinate players, coaches, and executives were frequently the older ones. The younger generation, meanwhile, was prepared to extend a warm welcome. This is a classic example of how ingrained beliefs may sabotage even the most promising possibilities. In summary, Christine Brennan's book is more than just Caitlin Clark's narrative. It exposes the WNBA's historic misstep during its biggest opportunity ever. She reveals everything, from petty jealousy to incompetent leadership. If you believe that the WNBA players are jealous, please let me know in the comments section below. Turn on all notifications, like and subscribe to ensure you don't miss anything. We'll see you in the next video. Click the video on the screen.